Hey guys, I'm here for two things: Georgia, Oregon preview, and I'll also preview Ohio State versus Notre Dame. But before I do that, I'm going to mention the Team Talent Composite for 247 Sports came out today. And what's that like? My Team Talent formula. It's a more scientific or mathematic formula using the Gaussian distribution theory in order to come up with the numbers for the teams. Mine just uses a basic formula that goes from highest ranked, most points to lower. But they both kind of have that bell curve, that kind of like hierarchy from top to bottom that I come up with similar results, much like last year, very similar to this year. Just like my formula, the Team Talent Composite has the same top five: Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas A&M, and Clemson. I'd say the elite tier. I'd actually say they're all five tier one. I'd say elite is Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and then I'd just say tier one would be Clemson and Texas A&M. A little less talent on those rosters. Then your tier two. These are what I would call the contenders. Chris Hummer wrote a great article about what all these numbers mean and how they've showed up what teams make the college football playoff. And outside of the top 16, since the Team Talent Composite came about in 2015, in 7 years of data, only 3 teams outside the top 16 have ever even made the college football playoff. 2015, Michigan State; 2016, Washington; and 2022, Cincinnati. I'd really say it's going to be the same this year. Because when you look at it, I'd say 6 to 16 are those teams that you're like, if they have really good quarterback play, these teams could make the college football playoff. Outside of that, there is a couple teams I'm going to mention them, and I'll point out where their numbers are. Tier 2, I'd say, is Texas, number 6, Oregon 7, LSU 8, Oklahoma 9, Notre Dame 10, USC 11, Florida 12, Miami 13, Michigan 14, Penn State 15, and North Carolina 16. And then after that, there's a definite drop-off. Mine, so this is pretty much the same as mine. There's just a little bit of differences. I had actually LSU 6, Texas 7, Oregon 8, Notre Dame 9, Oklahoma 10, 11, Florida 12, USC 13, Miami 14, Michigan 15, Penn State 16, North Carolina. It's literally the same teams. There's just like 11 and 12, Florida and USC are flipped. 9 and 10, Oklahoma and Notre Dame are flipped. LSU is a little higher than Texas and Oregon in mine. Texas and Oregon are higher than LSU in that. Same teams, similar talent. I wouldn't say there's much difference. Some teams have a little more blue chip players. Some teams have some more top 100 players. That's kind of the difference. Then the final 8 teams are exactly the same: Auburn, Florida State, Tennessee, South Carolina, Washington, Stanford, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Wisconsin. Exact same my top 25. It's literally the exact same top 25. The only difference is I have Wisconsin at 21. They have Wisconsin at 25. Washington, Stanford, I have flipped a little bit, but South Carolina, Tennessee flipped. But for the most part, it's very similar. And when you see it, it's like barely any points on here. It'll be like within a couple points, and then on here, you look at mine, it'll be within a point or two when it gets to that, like, teams that are really close. We'll see how the numbers show up, but I think once again, the data doesn't lie. I think the contenders are who you think they are. The team that I'm seeing getting a lot of college football playoff noise, where the thing is, the Utah Utes. I actually predicted them to win the Pac-12, and I actually predicted them to sneak into the playoff in that back way kind of way. Utah, is this 2020? No. Okay. My formula went off. I got to pull my formula up. No, pull the composite up. Because I only do the top 25. I do not do all the teams. They do all the teams in college football. The team that they have as a dark horse, I actually have getting into the back end of the playoff, is the Utah Utes at number 33. Well, number 33, that would be the second lowest rated team to make the college football playoff. It would be the only Power 5 team outside of the top 25 in the history of since the college team talent composite was invented. And that kind of goes to show when I have them losing to Florida, I have them losing to Oregon. I somehow have them backdooring in when they beat Oregon in the Pac-12. But Utah is a team, because of that talent, they can lose. A few injuries to key positions. They just do not have that elite talent behind it. So if they have an injury to Cam Rising, they have an injury to Tavion Thomas, they have some injuries on the offensive line, Utah's a team that all of a sudden could go 8-4, 9-3. And I think a lot of people would be like, wow, that's a bad year by Utah. They really failed. And I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say a team that has the 33rd most talented roster in the nation, the 6th most talented roster in the Pac-12. I mean, they're playing teams like UCLA, Washington, Oregon, USC, and Florida that all have better baseline talent. I wouldn't consider a couple really key injuries and they go 8-4 to be a failure of a year. So keep that in mind. A team like Utah needs to stay healthy because they just do not have those people behind their starters, because their roster, they need to develop 3 stars to play at a high level. And they do a great job. Kyle Whittingham develops talent probably more than any other coach, perhaps better than any coach in college football. He develops guys that are 3 stars to be NFL draft picks, all Pac-12 players, and he's done it over and over. But that would be something to keep in mind with a team that I see as a dark horse. I don't know who else I would I mean, Michigan State's a team that you see some buzz. Can they challenge for the Big Ten East? They're only number 34, so they're not near as talented as Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. Baylor, defending Big 12 champions, the number 41 rated roster. They're another team that if they fall down to 8-4 and 7-5, if you hear someone say, "Man, Dave Aranda, what did he lose, man?" Is he really that? Did he just have one lucky year that he was able to win it? No, I'd say he doesn't have a great roster, comparably to even the rest of his conference. I mean, there's teams like obviously Oklahoma, Texas, and even a team like TCU that has better roster talent. Oklahoma State has better roster talent. So he could all of a sudden fall back just because of that. So that's things to keep in mind. When you need to question if a coach is like, he's not living expectations, is when you have a team with the roster talent of LSU. That's why Coach Orgeron got fired. When you have a top 10 roster, you should not be seeing 5 and 7 years. Clay Helton at USC, 4-8 with a top 10, top 15 roster. That gets you fired. But outside of that, Florida, top 10, top 15 roster, and they had such a horrible year. You get fired for that. You have too much talent on your roster to be losing some of those games. So that's something to keep in mind. I also would look at something to also look at, even in the more talented rosters, is how many scholarship players they have on the team. So LSU was 6 in my formula, 8 in the team talent composite, but they only have 71 scholarship players. They don't have a lot of depth. So they're a team that injuries happen. They just might not have the bodies to be able to play at the level that their supposed talent is. So Brian Kelly still has an issue with depth there. They're playing in the SEC, struggling with depth. 7-5, he might not be a terrible year for him. I would consider that. Other than that, it probably is what it is. Once again, James Franklin, someone I keep an eye on. Another top 15 roster. Let's see if he has another bad year. That's not great. Mac Brown, 16th rated roster, 3rd best roster in the ACC. If he's not able to kind of get back to that level of at least a couple years ago where they're challenging for a New Year's Six game, is Mac Brown the right guy? He can recruit, but is he getting it to that level? Okay, quick preview of the games after that. Check it out at 247 Sports, and check out my formula at sportscast.net. Check out my Twitter. I'm going to probably be covering the game on Saturday. I'm pumped. Oregon Ducks, Georgia. Let's go back to the formula in the team talent composite. Georgia, second best roster, according to both my formula and the team talent composite. It's tough to get better than Georgia. They have 67 blue chip players. I'm not looking at it right now, but it's like 35, 36 top 100 players, 15 5 stars. They're loaded. They lost a lot, but they bring in a lot. Oregon, They have a top 10 roster, the 7th best roster according to the Composite, 8 according to my formula. 60% of the roster at 50-plus blue-chip players, double-digit top 100 players at 12. They have 5 stars. Not at Georgia's level. Georgia definitely is a tier above. But Oregon is a team that has a very, very good roster. And that's why. What really is going to keep me from – I have Oregon covering. But what keeps me from saying they're going to – they really, I think, have a really good chance of pulling off the upset is 2 things. One, they do have a new coach, and I trust Dan Lanning. I think he's going to be a pretty good coach, but it's tough to play against Georgia, even though he was a defensive coordinator last year in your first game. Second of all, they're playing basically a home game for Georgia, and that's just going to be a disadvantage. It's just going to favor Georgia. It's so dumb that's a neutral site game. They needed to have that neutral site, either have it at the University of Georgia or do a true neutral site at like Jerry's World in Dallas. If it was a true neutral site, with Georgia, despite all that talent, having a lot of young players, and Oregon, despite the new coach, actually being pretty experienced at the positions that matter. What positions matter? Offensive line, defensive line, and quarterback. All positions matter, but if you have experience at quarterback, experience on your offensive line, experience on your defensive line, you can block for the quarterback. The quarterback will make probably better decision because he has more experience. And on the defensive line, you can help stop the run, and you can get after the quarterback. Those are the strengths of Oregon. We'll see if Bo Nix is a strength. That's still to be determined. But all their offensive linemen are back. Very experienced. I think it's 70-plus games of starting experience, pretty much juniors and seniors across the offensive line. Defensive line, the same. 3-year starter in Papo Amave, 3-year starter in Brandon Dorless. DJ Johnson has started at both sides of the ball. Braden Switten, it started when Kayvon Thibodeau went out last year. Very experienced and pretty deep on the defensive line. And then you have these really talented linebackers for Oregon. I would actually really consider having Oregon pull off this upset if it just was at Dallas. I think they could do some stuff because Georgia lost a ton of players to the draft. I mean, they lost, 9 guys on the defense? They had 15 players drafted. They had 7 defensive players drafted in the first 3 rounds, 5 in the first round. Ridiculous. They have tons of talented players back. Jalen Carter is one of the best defensive linemen in college football. Nolan Smith will be one of the better edge guys in college football. Kaylee Ringo is probably the best corner in college football. Tyreek Smith is a very experienced and good safety. But that all being said, they have some new pieces on the defensive line. Their linebackers are young. They're going to be new. They lost all their whole linebacker core, which is key. Linebackers call the defense. Could see some mistakes. They lost their 3 best wide receivers. Well, 2 they lost, and then 1 is out to injury. And Aya Smith is out to injury. They lost George Pickens to the draft, and Jermaine Burton transferred to Alabama. They lost their 2 best running backs. They still have very talented players. They're going to have great guys backing them up. They have 3 best tight ends in college football. They have a very talented offensive line. But they're a little young. They're a little new. They're coming off a national title. I could see them being just not the best in this game. And Oregon, the underdog, with the former defensive coordinator for Georgia coming in here, if that was on the road, I could see Oregon all of a sudden jumping out to this lead and it being a tough game. I would predict it to be a to-the-wire game because Oregon is going to be the best roster that they face all year, even in all the SEC, except for Alabama in the SEC championship. Oregon would be the best team that in their 12-game season that Georgia has scheduled. Oregon has the best roster to compete against them. It's the first game. The first game with a younger roster, it's going to be tougher. But I can't do it when it's in Georgia because I think Georgia's going to come out pumped. I think they're going to come out fire. I think they're going to score early, and I think they'll give them confidence. And I think Oregon will get acclimated. I think Oregon will stay in the game, but I just don't think they can pull it off in Georgia. I'm going to go 34-24 Georgia. The 17-point line, I understand it. The defending national champion at basically a home game. I think the 17-point line, that's a little bit optimistic. Like I said, if this is a true neutral site game, I'm going to do hypothetical here. It was in Dallas, Texas. I would go 31-28 Georgia wins on a last-second field goal. I think it would be that riveting in a game. I just don't think it's going to be as riveting because I think Georgia will get off to a good enough start. The momentum, the crowd, they'll be pumped up. And so I'm going to go 34-24. I think it stays. I kind of mapped out the game. I think they kind of stay up in that 7-14 range the whole game. Like get up 14-0. Oregon fights back, but the whole game they stay like up 17-7, 24-14, and then 30, and then eventually 34-14. I think it's you walk away saying Georgia's pretty good. Oregon's not bad. Oregon could win all the rest of their games. Georgia can be 12-0 again, play for the SEC championship, and obviously that's a tiebreaker when if you have like for instance a 12-1 Oregon versus a 12-1 Georgia. Well, Georgia probably wins the tiebreaker. I don't have Georgia making it because I actually have Georgia losing twice. I have them losing to South Carolina in an upset, and I have them losing to Alabama. But I could totally see Georgia also being 12-1, and I don't think they beat Alabama this year. I just don't. I think Alabama gets them this year. So that's my prediction, Georgia 34-24, but go Ducks. Second game, really quick, Notre Dame versus Ohio State at Ohio State. Pretty much the same line, 17. New coach for Notre Dame. He coached at the end of last year. He was their defensive coordinator. He's bringing back a top 10 roster, both in my formula and Composite. The top 10 roster for Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is pretty deep. I think they're pretty good. I think Ohio State's just a little bit better. They're a little deeper and they're a little better. They're a better roster, and it's at Ohio State. Enough key pieces in the secondary was lost for Notre Dame, and that's not good. Because Ohio State can throw the ball really well. They have maybe the best quarterback in college football in C.J. Stroud. They have the best wide receiver possibly in college football in Jackson Smith-Adigba. You got guys like Marvin Harrison, Emeka Boku, Trayvon Henderson. You got all these weapons. I look at it as I actually think 17 is what it is. I think it's about 41-24. I think Ohio State's up the whole game. I don't think they blow them out because Notre Dame has a good enough team. It's a tough year for Notre Dame. I look at that schedule, and Notre Dame has to play Ohio State, has to play Clemson, have games against like BYU, even a North Carolina game that's tricky, USC at USC. This is a tough year for Notre Dame. This is actually a pretty daunting schedule. When you look at the team talent composite, they play they play 4 teams in the top 16. They also have a game against BYU, who's going to be a pretty good team. Notre Dame beat a 9-3 team this year, 8-4. You might say, man, not a great first year for their first-year head coach, but a tough schedule and a younger team with a new head coach. I think Notre Dame will be good. They're recruiting really well, but I don't know if this is it. I think this is an 8-4, 9-3 kind of year for Notre Dame. Could be wrong. We'll see. I think Ohio State, I have them win the national title. That's how good I think they are. So check out both the games. Dogs, Buckeyes with the victory. Check out sportscast.net. I'm out.